In the sprawling, sun-drenched streets of Sydney, there exists a shadow economy where currency is not just measured in dollars, but in reputation and fear. For decades, law enforcement has played a high-stakes game of cat and mouse with established syndicates, but few families have commanded the attention of the authorities quite like the Ahmads, while many modern underworld figures crave the spotlight, splashing their ill-gotten wealth across social media. The Ahmad brothers Walid, known as Wally, Mahmoud, known as Brownie, and the stoic Ahmad, simply called Rock, attempted to operate differently. They sought to remain ghosts in the machine. However, when your resume includes extensive extortion and alleged high-level trafficking, staying invisible is an impossible luxury. Despite their best efforts to keep a low profile, they were anything but unknown. Over the years, police files accumulated at least 55 separate intelligence reports on the family, painting a picture of a brotherhood deeply entrenched in the city's dark underbelly. Wally, the eldest, was the first to land firmly in the crosshairs. By 2005, his freedom was curtailed after he accepted responsibility for the tragic end of May's Danny, an incident that unfolded outside a car salvage yard. While Brownie was flagged as a person of interest in that same case, the evidence was not there to hold him. But in this world, trouble does not wait for an invitation. It kicks down the door, and for Brownie, trouble arrived on a specific evening that would go down in history as one of the most volatile nights of vehicular violence the city had ever seen. It was September 11, 2005, when the tenuous peace broke. A man identified as Manza el-Husseini arrived at the Ahmad family stronghold, prepared for conflict. He was reportedly equipped with a ballistic vest and a firearm in each hand, intending to send a lethal message to the gathering inside. But the ambush failed spectacularly. Instead of securing a victory, el-Husseini fled the scene, staggering into a local hospital at 8:53 p.m. with significant injuries to his hand and shoulder. But the night was far from over. The retaliation was swift, calculated, and overwhelming. Mere minutes after the initial hospital admission, the streets erupted. 25 rounds were discharged from 4 separate weapons into the home of el-Husseini's mother, piercing the structure 13 times. 45 minutes later, a residential complex was sprayed with 22 shots. Most missed their intended mark, endangering 4 unrelated apartments. Though one unit was later identified as el-Husseini's residence, the chaos continued barely half an hour later when another 32 rounds decimated the home of his aunt. This was not just a warning, it was a scorched earth policy. Police units in the area eventually engaged in a high-speed pursuit of the gunman. Although the vehicle was lost in the chase, it was later discovered wrecked at Condell Park. Inside, the tools of the trade were laid bare: a Glock pistol with a fully loaded magazine and 17 spent casings scattered across the interior. Nearby, another Glock with an extended 30-round magazine was recovered from a gutter. Forensic analysis eventually pointed the finger at Brownie Ahmad. He faced the courts for the attack on el-Husseini, yet the outcome stunned observers. He received a surprisingly lenient sentence, one so short he reportedly counted the years on a single hand before blowing a mocking kiss to the detectives watching from the gallery. It was a moment of arrogance that signaled the Ahmads felt untouchable, but it also placed a permanent target on their backs. The brazen display in the courtroom did more than just irritate the detectives present. It catalyzed a renewed and intensified law enforcement effort. The Ahmad family was propelled to the very top of the priority list, resulting in the formation of a specialized unit known as Strike Force Morwick. The primary objective of this operation was to dismantle the network, with a specific focus on Rock Ahmad. Unlike his brothers, Rock had managed to maintain a veneer of legitimacy, or at the very least, successful evasion. Despite being deeply entrenched in the daily operations of the syndicate, his official record was surprisingly sparse, littered only with relatively minor infractions, such as common assault and witness intimidation. He was a ghost in the system, slippery and careful. The task force painstakingly mapped out 5 separate illicit supply lines and identified numerous mid-level managers, yet the evidence required to place handcuffs on the brothers remained elusive. One investigator noted that the Ahmads' true strength lay in their loyalty. Unlike rival dynasties that crumbled under the weight of internal betrayal and paranoia, the brothers stood united. But that unity was about to face a catastrophic test. On April 9, 2016, the simmering tensions of the underworld boiled over in an industrial cul-de-sac at Condell Park. The location was Wally's automotive body shop, a place of business that would soon become a crime scene. That afternoon, members of the rival Elmir network arrived at the yard. Among the group was Fawaz Elmir, who had only recently tasted freedom after a stint behind bars for cocaine distribution, accompanied by his son and other associates. Also present was Safwan Sharbaji, a man connected to the Elmirs by marriage. The catalyst for this high-stakes meeting was reportedly a financial dispute involving a debt of approximately $100,000. In the world of organized crime, six-figure debts are rarely settled with calm conversation, especially when Wally and Brownie Ahmad were holding court. Both brothers had cultivated reputations for being volatile and unpredictable, and a confrontation between two such dominant factions was a powder keg, waiting for a spark. Details regarding who made the first move remain murky, lost in the chaotic testimony of the day, but the verbal dispute rapidly descended into armed conflict. Police reports indicate that up to 5 separate firearms were drawn and discharged during the melee. When the smoke cleared, Safwan Sharbaji lay critically injured, having sustained fatal gunshot wounds to the head and chest. The incident was not just a tragedy, it was a declaration of war. The loss of Sharbaji sent shockwaves through the criminal ecosystem, signaling the beginning of the end for the Ahmad brothers' reign of invincibility. The fallout was immediate and drastic. Realizing the gravity of the situation and the inevitable police heat that would follow a fatal daylight shooting, Brownie made a calculated decision to vanish. He fled the country, seeking refuge in Lebanon to escape the tightening net of the investigation. Wally, however, chose a different path. Perhaps believing he could weather the storm, or simply refusing to leave his stronghold, he remained in Sydney. Reports suggest he attempted to lower his profile, altering his daily patterns and movements to avoid detection by both the authorities and those seeking retribution. But in a city where blood demands blood, staying put would prove to be a fatal miscalculation. The Brotherhood had been physically separated, and with Brownie thousands of miles away, the protective shield that had surrounded the family was beginning to fracture. For Wally Ahmad, the streets of Sydney had transformed from a kingdom into a cage. In the weeks following the Condell Park confrontation, the silence from his enemies was deafening, a tactical pause that usually precedes a storm. He was living on borrowed time, and despite his attempts to scramble his routine, the Underworld has eyes everywhere. Just 3 weeks after the incident that sent his brother fleeing to Lebanon, Wally's luck ran out. On a seemingly ordinary afternoon, he had just finished a workout and was seated at a cafe outside the Bankstown Central Shopping Centre, a public space he likely deemed safe due to the crowds. He was wrong. A masked figure materialized from the throngs of shoppers, closing the distance with terrifying speed. Before Wally could react, the gunman unleashed a volley of fire, striking him 7 times in the chest and back. The assassin vanished as quickly as he appeared, diving into a waiting Mercedes that was later discovered engulfed in flames, a standard procedure to destroy forensic evidence. Despite the frantic efforts of shocked bystanders to render aid, Wally succumbed to his injuries. His public execution was a seismic event, shattering any illusion of stability within the syndicate. But in this line of work, violence is cyclical. 6 months later, the ledger was balanced in blood. Hamad Assad, a known contract killer who had allegedly boasted about being the triggerman in Wally's demise, was ambushed in his own driveway. Not long after, Kamal Barakat, an associate of the Hells Angels and another suspect in the conspiracy, met a similarly violent end inside his home. The message was clear. The Ahmad family might be wounded, but they still had reach. However, the removal of enemies does not solve the practical problems of business. With Wally gone and Brownie in exile, the burden of leadership fell squarely on the shoulders of Rock Ahmad. It was a poisoned chalice. Reports indicate that Wally had left behind significant financial liabilities, with debts estimated around $100,000. Rock was not only grieving the loss of his brother and navigating the vacuum of power, but he was also facing immediate financial pressure to settle the family's accounts. Desperation often breeds recklessness, and Rock, needing a massive influx of capital, decided to pivot from local enforcement to international logistics. Rock leveraged his connections to buy into a massive importation scheme, a gamble he hoped would secure the family's future. The plan was ambitious. The syndicate intended to flood the Australian market with nearly 2 tons of MDMA, 136 kilograms of cocaine, and 15 kilograms of crystal methamphetamine. It was a shipment worth millions, enough to clear all debts and re-establish dominance. But Rock was unaware that the foundation of the plot was already compromised. An undercover operative had successfully infiltrated the upper echelons of the syndicate, earning the trust of the organizers. For months, police listened and watched as the deal came together. In August 2017, the trap snapped shut. Tactical teams moved in, arresting Rock and his co-conspirators. The gamble had failed spectacularly. Instead of a financial windfall, Rock was handed a 15-year prison sentence, effectively removing the last steadfast anchor of the Ahmad family from the streets. While Rock was being processed into the prison system, the final chapter of the Ahmad saga was unfolding across the ocean. In Lebanon, Brownie was finding that exile was far from a paradise. Without the family's Sydney-based revenue streams, he was reportedly struggling with significant financial strain. The pressure of his brother's passing, combined with the reality of his pregnant wife and 3 children being left vulnerable in Australia, eventually forced his hand. In March 2017, Brownie made the fateful decision to return to Sydney, likely hoping to collect outstanding debts and stabilize his family's situation. However, the authorities were waiting. The moment he stepped off the plane, tactical police swarmed, arresting him for his role in the fatal 2016 Condell Park incident. The legal proceedings that followed painted a picture of a man haunted by the violence he had both orchestrated and endured. While the initial murder charges were downgraded to manslaughter, to which Brownie pleaded guilty. The court heard of his extensive history of firearm offenses and his erratic behavior. He was sentenced to 5 years, but prison walls proved to be a porous barrier for his influence. Even from behind bars, Brownie allegedly maintained his grip on power through a campaign of high-stakes extortion. Reports surfaced of him targeting affluent inmates, demanding sums as high as $250,000 for their safety. One Underworld source described him as a man who lacked the patience for complex hits, but possessed a terrifying willingness to use immediate, public violence. He was viewed as a loose cannon, someone who would settle a score in a crowded shopping center without a second thought. Upon his release in 2021, the world Brownie returned to him vastly different and far more dangerous. The anti-gang unit, Strike Force Raptor, issued him a chillingly direct warning. He was a marked man. $1 million bounty had been placed on his head, fueled by a long-standing and bloody feud with the rival Alameddine crime family. Despite the police urge to go into hiding, Brownie refused to retreat. He was seen frequenting his old haunts, allegedly trying to rebuild his empire through drive-by intimidations and fresh extortion plots. It was a high-stakes gamble that could only end in one of two ways. The end came on the night of April 27, 2022, as Brownie stepped out of a friend's home in Greenacre. A gunman who had been lying in wait emerged from the darkness. A barrage of lead cut through the night air, striking Brownie multiple times before he could even reach for a weapon. Paramedics arrived within minutes, but the damage was absolute. He died on the pavement of the suburban street, as had become the grim tradition. A torched vehicle was found nearby, marking the signature of a professional hit. The execution triggered a fresh wave of retaliatory violence across Sydney, including the ambush of high-ranking figures like Tarek Zahed, and the fatal shooting of Brownie's own nephew, Rami Iskander. In the months following, 6 men were apprehended and charged in connection to Brownie's death, with police uncovering further plots to eliminate underworld rivals. The story of the Ahmad brothers serves as a stark reminder of the gravity of the criminal life. Despite the millions of dollars and the brief moments of perceived power, the cycle of the underworld eventually consumes everyone it touches, leaving behind only police files and empty chairs at the family table.